Welcome to Healing Your Families. I am excited to introduce my guest today. Her name is Anne Alvares, and she is from British Columbia. She also has a background in education like I do. And she was a school counselor, and now she is a parent coach. And she's sharing a special aspect of our mental well-being. And that's, how do you handle that pain from your past? So Anne, welcome.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here. I've been following you on LinkedIn. I love your posts, love the messages you share, and I would love to hear more about how you became a parent coach.
Well, it's always been in my heart to help parents because I've been a teacher for so many years, and then I became a school counselor, and I was a school counselor for over 15 years. And I work with a lot of parents and their families. I feel like when we work with families, we make the most impact, right, with our children. And just like I would say this year, I've just really been leaning into God about what my calling is. What am I supposed to be doing? How can I serve you? And God's put it in my heart. He actually said, I want you to be part of the healing of this world. And because I have such a love for children, I really want to work with parents so that we can teach our children how to be in good relationship, how to foster healthy relationships. And so it is kind of my mission, my goal to change the way we are as parents so that we can raise generations of kids that will have healthy relationships in their adult lives and continue that healthy relationship throughout generations to come.
I love that. And that I'm just totally with you there. It makes a difference. You know, families are the foundation of society. How would our world change if every child got that love, that nurturing, that support that they needed to believe in themselves and reach their potential? I love
Absolutely.
what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, sorry, did you have a question?
No.
Okay.
You were going to tell us elaborate on how you help parents.
Okay, so my niche is I really would like to work with parents who maybe have had childhood pain. And by childhood pain, I mean that something was missing in your childhood. Maybe you didn't feel loved enough. Maybe you were criticized. Maybe your parents had a lot of expectations of you. Perhaps you had a lot of responsibility and you took on more of an adult role in your family. Or maybe there was abuse. Maybe there was verbal, physical abuse, sexual abuse, trauma. Like we all have ranges of things that maybe we did not get from our parents. And so I want to work with parents who recognize that I didn't have an ideal childhood. I'm carrying some stuff, some pain from my childhood. It hasn't been healed. And I notice that it's showing up when I'm parenting my kids. And I want to change that. So really those are the parents I would love to help. And I know that I can help because my story is your story. I came from a very dysfunctional home life, and my parents were very controlling. There was abuse, and my parents were not relational at all, and so they never praised us. They said they loved us, but we didn't feel loved because their actions didn't speak love. And I share a lot of times that as an adult, it really affected me. Like I had a hard time really knowing what my voice was and listening to my voice because I was always told what to do. And so as a young woman, I was not confident. As a young woman, I was repeating patterns from my childhood, like attracting people that were controlling in my life, unhealthy relationships. And I actually didn't know what a healthy relationship was as a young adult. And then over the years, as I've become like a teacher and a counselor, I have learned what a healthy relationship is and how to foster that in our kids. And becoming a mother has really impacted my life because they are my motivation to heal and to do better, to change the generation of kids. With my own children, it started with being very relational with them because I didn't want to repeat what I grew up with. Yeah.
And that is profound. And thank you for sharing that. And sometimes, we tend to do raise our children the way we were raised, repeat what our parents did. And I loved how you pointed out, if you can recognize that you want something better, then, so as you work with these parents, do you provide online classes?
Yeah, I do have a course on Teachable, and it basically goes through the first unit is on how to heal your childhood pain. And then the second unit is how do we connect with our kids and foster healthy relationships with them. And then the third one is how do we communicate with our kids so that they hear us and they want to cooperate. So those are basically the 3 units that I cover in my mini boot camp course on Teachable. But I also do have a coaching package as well that goes for 9 weeks where I can work with a group of parents or one-on-one parents if they feel like they need more support, and then give them what they need in that regard.
Well, it sounds to me that you're saying the first step is parents need to recognize that
Yes.
they need to make a change. They want something better.
Yeah. So that you're carrying childhood pain if you're yelling at your child, if you're trying to control your child, if your child's behavior is affecting you and you personalize it, you say, "Oh, they're being mean to me." That's childhood pain. If you are overly sensitive to their words, if you are overprotective of them and you live in fear, again, that's childhood pain. So when you recognize, oh, I'm doing this or I'm feeling this, then you know that that is coming from your own childhood. And once you recognize that, once you become aware, then you can start to change it. But the first step really is awareness. You have to become aware this is happening.
Now, Anne, this is huge because it's natural for most parents to feel that my children are frustrating me, my children are annoying me. But to really be honest and realize this is coming from within me.
Yes.
I think that's, and I had not realized it's that simple.
Yes.
Because when you feel good about yourself, when you are totally at peace and not hurting,
yeah,
you don't feel a need to yell at your children or to overprotect them. You don't personalize what they say. They go through phases.
It's so true. Like once you become aware, oh yeah, this isn't good. This isn't healthy. This is coming from my childhood pain. Then we can begin to change, the way that we are. I always say, like, I really simplify what a healthy relationship is. I think it's really important to simplify it. A healthy relationship feels good. So if it doesn't feel good, like the yelling, the controlling, the punishing, that doesn't feel good. If it doesn't feel good, it's not healthy. So if our children don't feel good, then it's not healthy. We should feel good in our relationships with our kids.
Well, in the atmosphere in the home.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So I say to parents, like, the first thing is, you're carrying childhood pain if you have these in your parenting, like the yelling and the controlling and the punishing. And the first thing you need to do is you need to tell your story. Because if you don't tell your story, then it continues to live inside of you. But once you release it, once you say, this is how I felt when I was a kid, this is what happened to me. And I'm saying release it to someone who you feel safe with. It can be someone, a close friend. It can be a spouse. It could be a counselor. It could be a journal if you're not ready to speak it. That's okay. The most important thing is tell your story, because the story needs to come out of you so it no longer has power. And then once we have our story out, then we can start to look at our story in a different way. And I always say, the first, you need to recognize what were the thoughts going through your head. Like when something happened to you, like when your parents yelled at you, what was going on in your head? And usually it's, I'm bad. I'm a terrible person. I'm not worth anything. I'm worthless. These are this is what we tell ourselves as children. We never blame our parents. We only blame ourselves. And those thoughts we carry into adult life, right? So you need to know, what were your thoughts when you were experiencing your childhood? What were your thoughts? For me, it was like, I don't have a voice. And I carried that in adult life. So I never really spoke my opinion until later on down the road when I got more confident. So what was the thoughts that you had of yourself as a child? Because if it's not healed, then you still carry those thoughts about yourself. And then when you realize what were the thoughts, then the power is in changing the way you're thinking about it. Actually, you're worthy. Actually, you're amazing. Actually, your parents didn't have what they needed to give you because your parents had childhood pain. Do you see how there's a different energy there when you're changing the way you think about your past? That is the power. If we can release the pain and say, you know what? Why do I feel bad? Did I do something wrong as a kid? Or were my parents doing the wrong to me? Were my parents hurting me? Because whoever is doing the hurting should feel bad. Not the kid. If the kid's not doing the hurting, the kid shouldn't feel bad, right? And so as an adult, you can say, well, I was a child and I shouldn't have been treated that way. But my parents came from a place of pain and they didn't know any better. And then we start to develop empathy, right? We start to develop empathy for our parents. And that starts to bring forgiveness, Like I can release and I can forgive my parents because they had pain that was unresolved and they didn't know how to do better. They didn't know how to give me what I needed as a kid. And that is so powerful when we get to that place of really releasing the pain and forgiving our parents. And we forgive them for ourselves because we don't want to carry bitterness and we don't want to carry any kind of negative emotions about our childhood into our adult life. So the forgiveness is super, super important.
Well, I
And then we
totally,
just, yeah,
I just totally agree with that. I don't think there is much else that is more healing than forgiveness.
yes, yes, we forgive for ourselves, not for the other person, because it never serves us in our life to carry hate, to carry bitterness. When we take up space with hate and bitterness, we cannot be the best parents we can be, because then you're taking up room that really should be love, right? You're taking up the space that really should be love, loving yourself, loving your children, um, caring for, loving those people that hurt you. And I know it's a big thing, it's a big step, but when you get there, your life gets better.
Well, it's freeing.
Yeah.
It's empowering.
Yeah. And then the last step is we have to stop seeing ourselves as victims, because victims have no power. And when we see ourselves as victims, we see ourselves as helpless. We have no control. we have no power to change our lives. So let's leave victimhood aside. You were a kid. Maybe you didn't have power then, but you're not a kid anymore. You're an adult and you're not a victim anymore because you're in charge of your life and you're a survivor. I want you to see yourself as a survivor and a thriver. That's how I see myself now. I'm a survivor and I'm a thriver, right? Because I choose that. I don't want to be a victim because I'm an adult and I do have control over my life now. The past is in the past. This is now. This is the future. I have control. I have power. And you can say, like, I was abused, I was mistreated, I was hurt, I was unloved, but it wasn't about me. I did nothing wrong. My parents did the wrong. I'm worthy. I'm of value. I deserve to be loved and cared for. I'm a survivor. I'm a thriver. I am going to find my purpose, even though I came from childhood pain. And that is so powerful. When you get to that place of, I'm a survivor, I'm a thriver, I'm an adult now, I'm in charge, and my life is just going to get better. And I deserve it to be better because I suffered as a kid. So my adult life should be amazing, right? You deserve it because you suffered as a kid. And you deserve to be a thriver in your adult life.
Well, everyone
So
deserves to thrive and flourish and become their best selves.
absolutely, absolutely. And the other thing too is okay, so Viktor Frankl's an Austrian psychiatrist, right? He's no longer with us, but I just love his story. I love his messages. And he talks a lot about finding purpose in our pain. And I actually have found purpose in my pain. Like, this is my purpose, right? For my pain. If I did not go through childhood pain, then I couldn't speak about it so intimately and share this and help parents with it. So this is my purpose for my pain, is to help parents heal and to become better and to love their children better because they went through that and they don't want to repeat it again. So when we find purpose for our pain, the pain becomes meaningful. It becomes a reason to do better and be better. So I just love that idea of, even though you're going through pain or you have gone through pain, that there is a bigger, larger purpose. And you are going to fulfill that purpose, right? Because you can empathize with others and you can be a better parent because you suffered as a child.
Well, I love that power of breaking that generational cycle. You know, we talk about the cycle of abuse. All it takes is one person to say, no, it stops with me.
Yes.
I think that's
Yes.
huge.
It's
So,
huge.
and I love your idea that, you know, we have no control over what happened to us as a child, but as adults, we have complete choice in healing ourselves, finding
Yes.
the purpose in our pain. And I agree with you, Viktor Frankl. He's one of my favorite authors too.
He's amazing.
He
Amazing.
is. He is.
Yeah.
Now, there was something you said a while back when you said you need to tell your story. And you specified you're not telling your story to your children.
No,
They're not ready for that.
no.
But to someone you trust, even if it's just getting it out of your head and writing in a journal, or
Yes.
a close friend, a spouse, a
Yes.
counselor. And that's true. Just acknowledging it happened and then assigning blame where it belongs.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to tell your story because, like, as kids, we were probably discouraged from talking. Like, if there was abuse, your parents didn't want you to talk about the abuse, right? So that's why it's so important. Like, actually, I kept my story a secret into my adult life, right? Because it was like my parents gave us the message: you don't tell anybody, you don't talk about it, right? And so it was only at a crisis point in my life. I had a very toxic relationship with my mother uh, as a young woman, and it was really bad. And I was at a crisis point. I was like, I need to move away because I cannot have this relationship in my life the way it is right now. It's affecting me. And so I decided, we did decide to move away. We moved away for 3 years. But before we moved away, I went to see a counselor and I just unleashed everything in my childhood. And I wept and I cried and I was just so it was so good because it was good to release it all because I had never done that. And it was a safe environment. It was a counselor. And she helped me to see, like, my biggest question was, how come my parents didn't know? How come my parents did that? Like, it was all about, like, why weren't they aware that they were causing damage to us? And the counselor said to me, just be happy that you're aware. That was really like a light bulb moment for me because when you are aware, that is when change can happen. When you are aware, this happened to me and I'm carrying pain, then you can say, okay, but I don't want to carry pain. Then you have choices, right? So that was the first time I told my story, and it was the moment that I began my healing journey. Like, I didn't heal overnight, but it was the pinnacle moment of the start of my healing journey. So that's why you have to tell your story because it'll be the start of you healing.
So it's finding that safe person
Yes.
and
Yes.
acknowledging it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the awareness.
Yes.
Tell your story.
Tell your story.
And then make a healthy choice. I love how you brought in forgiveness.
Yes.
If we just carry that anger and bitterness, that's too heavy of a burden to carry.
Yeah, I've always been interested in psychology, and I actually did start um being curious about my parents. Like, why did my parents raise us this way? What was their story? What happened to them? And I learned things about my parents that I didn't know. Like, my dad, he was put into a boarding school in the UK at the age of 9 or 10. His dad sent him away, and he didn't really have any family. So his siblings were his family. And he did have some abuse as well in that boarding school. So that I know he came from pain. And my mom had a very domineering mother, or controlling mother. My mom was a controlling mother, right? So she was repeating the pattern of that. And when I realized my parents had their own pain, then it was easier for me to empathize and to be, understanding, you know, instead of uh, being hateful or bitter. I had a place of empathy because they didn't have what they needed as well.
The empathy
Mm.
is huge. That's
Yes.
a key component in emotional intelligence, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. It's so important. Yeah.
And how
So
you,
that's the first thing. Tell your story. Then you got to change the way you're thinking about it because it wasn't about you. It was about your parents. And then you need to have empowering thoughts that are going to fuel you today. You need to change the dialogue that you had as a kid because you're an adult now and you're in charge. And you know that you were worthy. You know that you are worthy. And you're worthy of happiness because you suffered, you had pain. So this is the time to embrace joy.
you
Yeah.
mentioned that children tend to blame themselves and there's
Yes.
shame. They will feel intense shame. And a
Yeah.
lot of times they'll keep the secret because they're too ashamed to admit it.
Yes.
So when they're able to truly identify who they are, maybe they got this message that they were worthless, they just weren't good enough. But
Yeah.
when they assign blame where it belongs and they get a more accurate picture of who they are,
Yeah.
And this is where I feel it's very helpful to have a connection with the higher power.
Yes, absolutely. I will tell you, parents, that your children internalize what you do to them and what you say to them. So if you are punishing them, they are going to say, I'm a bad person. You know, I'm not worthy, or there's something wrong with me. I know this because I've been counseling kids for like over 15 years. And no matter what the story is, they never blame their parents. They always blame themselves. And that's what kids do, because you know what? They love us so much. They love us so much, and they are so loyal to their parents. So whenever their parents are doing wrong to them, they say, it's about me. I'm the problem. I'm a bad kid.
And they'll
That's why
even
we have to
protect their
change it.
parents, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They protect their parents, even if they're abused. They protect their parents. There's a loyalty, there's such a loyalty there. I'm always surprised when I'm counseling, but I know now the way kids think, and that is what they think, you know? So yeah, that's why we have to change the way we are with them.
Something for parents to be aware of. That the great responsibility, this sacred charge of raising a child, and you're teaching them
Yes.
how to feel about themselves, whether or not they
Yes.
can believe in themselves, feel like they can contribute. This
Yeah.
is
Remember,
huge.
it is so huge. Like when your kids feel unconditional love and they feel supported, I say there's three components to a healthy relationship with your kids: that your kids feel seen, heard, and supported. If they have those three things, then they are going to go out in the world as adults with confidence, and they are going to know what a healthy relationship is. So they're not going to be attracting people that are unhealthy in their lives. Like I attracted unhealthy people. Why? Because I lived in an unhealthy environment. So we don't want that for our kids. We want our kids to attract healthy, supportive uh, relationships with others, you know?
Absolutely. So, Anne, how can people contact you and learn more
Oh,
about your
okay.
course
I'm
on
all over the
school?
place on social media. So I have my program is called the Masterful Parenting Program. I'm on Facebook. So my Facebook business page is Masterful Parenting. I'm also on LinkedIn under my name, Anne Alvarez. And I have a YouTube channel. It's called Masterful Parenting, a podcast, Masterful Parenting. And I also have, I'm on Instagram as well, Alvarez JO. That's my name. And I also have I said YouTube channel, and I also have a course on Teachable. And it goes through these things, these steps of healing, communicating with your child and connecting with your child. So I go through very, very specific tools to give parents, to give them confidence in their parenting. So that's where you can find me. I do a 30-minute free clarity call. You can pick my brains for 30 minutes with all your questions. It's free. So you just have to message me, email me, or through any of my contacts, you can message me on Messenger too. And then we can book something.
I love what you're doing in breaking this generational cycles. Let's create this
Yes.
world where all children are being raised in a healthy relationship. They're being seen, heard, and supported.
Yeah, my motto is change the world one parent at a time. So yeah, that's the mission.
It's great. It goes right along with mine. Let's make the world a better place by strengthening families.
Yes.
I love what you're doing.
Thank you
And
so much,
thank you
Emily.
so much for joining us. Now in a few minutes, we're gonna open it up for question and answers. For now, I'm going to, any Q&A or further discussion. For now, I'm going to thank viewers for joining us, and join us again next week at the same time. This is Emily Penrod, at healingyourfamilies.com.